You ever notice how people don't really appreciate something until it's gone? Oh, sure, they think they do. They nod, they smile, they say all the right things. But deep down, they take it for granted. Because that's just how people are. They assume what's there today will be there tomorrow. A man spends his whole life wearing a mask. Not the kind you see at costume parties, no, something much better. The kind that convinces the whole world he's got it all under control. He laughs at the right jokes, nods at the right moments, and when people ask how he's doing, well, of course, he's fine. That's the trick, isn't it? The whole world buys into the act, and why wouldn't they? He's made sure they do. No cracks, no weaknesses, nothing to see here, folks. Just a man who's got it all figured out. But then there's you, and somehow, without even trying, you see right through him. You catch the way his jaw tightens when something's wrong, the way his shoulders tense just a little before he shrugs it off. You don't buy the act. Don't fall for the rehearsed lines, and that's new. That's dangerous, because he spent his whole life making sure no one gets close enough to see behind the curtain. And yet, here you are, seeing him in ways he never even saw himself. At first, he doesn't know what to do with it. Oh, he might joke, he might act like it doesn't matter, like it's just a coincidence that you always seem to know when something's off, but deep down, it shakes him. Because you don't just see the version of him that the world claps for. You see the version he doesn't show anyone. And the real kicker? You don't run. You don't treat him like a puzzle to be solved or a problem to be fixed. You just understand? That kind of thing? That sticks with a man long after you're gone, long after life has pulled you both in different directions. He'll sit there staring at a world that suddenly feels a little more hollow and wonder how you did it. How you slipped past every wall, every defense, without him even realizing it. Because now he's surrounded by people who only see the surface. They laugh at his jokes but don't hear what he's not saying. They nod along but don't really listen. And he never noticed before, never cared, because that was the way it had always been. Until you. Now he can't not notice. Can't unsee the difference between being understood and just being tolerated. And that's when it happens. My father shouted again. That's when the weight of it all sinks in. Because a man can go his whole life thinking he's fine without something, until he gets a taste of what it's like to have it. Then he can't pretend anymore. So he tells himself it's nothing, just a passing thought, just a moment of nostalgia. But it lingers. It shows up in the quiet moments, in the spaces where he used to hear your voice, in the way conversations with other people suddenly feel so empty. Because that's what you gave him. Not just words, not just time, but understanding. The kind that's rare, the kind that you don't just find again in someone else. And the worst part, he never even asked for it. Never went looking for someone to see him like that. But you did. And now he knows what it feels like. Knows what it's like to sit across from someone who doesn't need him to be anything other than himself. And he used a disease to disassociate. And that kind of thing, that's not something a man forgets. That's the kind of thing that lingers, that haunts, that turns quiet moments into reminders of everything he lets slip away. You know what's funny? People think loneliness is about being alone, about sitting in an empty room, staring at four walls with no one to talk to, but that's not how it works, not really. No, real loneliness, That's being surrounded by people and still feeling like no one actually sees you. That's laughing at all the right moments, shaking hands, making small talk. But deep down, knowing that if you just disappeared, if you just slipped out the back door, no one would even notice. And for a man, that feeling, that's just life. He gets used to it. He learns to wear it like a second skin. People expect him to be fine, to be strong, to keep moving forward without needing anyone. So he does. He wakes up, does what he has to do, cracks a few jokes, and keeps the world convinced that he's perfectly okay. And it works. Until one day it doesn't. Because then there's you. And somehow, without even trying, you change everything. You don't just talk to him, you're with him. You sit with him in silence when he doesn't feel like talking. You notice the little things, the way he exhales just a little too heavily after a long day, the way his hands tighten around his phone before he sets it down. You don't ask him to explain, don't demand answers, but you make it clear. You see him, and for the first time, maybe in a long time, he's not just a guy going through the motions. He's there in the moment with you. And the thing is, he doesn't even realize it at first. It's subtle. It sneaks up on him the way your presence makes everything feel a little lighter. The way conversations with you don't feel forced. Don't feel like just another routine exchange. With you, he doesn't have to be on. Doesn't have to be the guy with all the answers. Doesn't have to wear that carefully crafted armor. But here's the problem. The moment a man gets used to something, the moment he starts to rely on it, well, that's the moment he takes it for granted. Not because he doesn't appreciate it. No, that's not it. But because he assumes it'll always be there. He tells himself that the comfort you bring, the way you make everything feel a little less heavy, is just part of life now. And so, he lets himself believe it'll always be that way until it's not. One day, you're gone. Maybe you walked away. Maybe life pulled you in a different direction. Maybe he was too caught up in himself to notice you slipping through the cracks. And suddenly, the silence isn't just silence anymore. It's empty. He goes through his day the way he always has, but something's missing. Conversations feel dull. Laughter feels forced. And the people around him, they don't get him. Not the way you did. The way he could just exist around you wasn't just your presence. It was the way you were there, the way you sat with him in the quiet moments. The way he could just exist around you without the weight of expectations pressing down on his shoulders. And now he misses it. He misses you. Not just because you were there, but because you made being there feel different. Because without you, the silence doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like a reminder that not everyone listens the way you did. Not everyone cares the way you did. Not everyone stays the way you did. And the worst part? He never saw it coming. He never thought he'd feel the absence of something he never even realized he needed. And you broke him. Because that's the thing about comfort. It's quiet. It's subtle. You don't notice it while it's there. But when it's gone, oh, you feel it. And he does. Every single day. A man can build his whole life around routine. Wake up, Work, eat, sleep, repeat. A well-oiled machine, no room for distractions, no unnecessary detours. Everything in its place, everything under control. He convinces himself he doesn't need anything else. Doesn't need anyone stepping in, stirring things up, making him feel things he doesn't have time to feel. He's got it all figured out. Or so he thinks. Then, out of nowhere, there's you. And you don't force your way in, don't demand space in his carefully structured world. No, you just exist, effortlessly, unpredictably, in a way that somehow makes everything feel different without even trying. He doesn't see it at first. How could he? He's too busy, too focused, too convinced that nothing and no one can shake the solid ground he stands on. But oh, the cracks start to form. It's the little things, the way his coffee tastes a little blander when you're not around, the way his days feel longer, heavier, even when nothing's changed, the way he catches himself reaching for his phone, only to remember there's no message from you waiting on the other end. See, what he didn't realize, what he never thought to consider, is that you weren't just part of his routine. You were the thing that made it feel less like a routine, the difference between going through the motions and actually living. And here's the real kicker. He only figures it out when it's too late, when the seat across from him is empty, when the laughter that used to fill his space is gone, when everything he once took for granted is just missing. That's when the weight settles in. That's when he notices how quiet the world feels without you in it. Because a man can keep himself busy, can throw himself into work, into distractions, into anything that keeps him from feeling too much. But he can't lie to himself forever. Not when the absence of you turns every single moment into a reminder. He goes about his day, same as always, but now there's a shadow hanging over everything. A thought gnawing at the back of his mind. Something's missing. At first he won't admit it. No, that would mean acknowledging that he let himself care, that he let himself get attached to something beyond his control, so he fights it. He tells himself it's fine, that he's fine, just another day, just another routine, nothing's changed. Except everything has. Because once you've had something real, something that makes you feel alive in a way you never expected, you can't just go back to the way things were. So he tried to flail away. Not really. But the worst part, the part that haunts him, it's not just that you're gone, it's how you're gone. See, loss is easy to understand when it's clear-cut, when there's a reason, when there's someone to blame. But when it's quiet, when it's gradual, when it happens so slowly he doesn't even see it slipping away, that's the kind of thing that keeps a man up at night. That's the kind of thing that keeps a man up at night. The kind of thing that makes him replay every conversation, every missed moment, every sign he ignored because he was too busy convincing himself that none of it mattered. But now it's too late. Now his routine isn't just a routine, it's a prison, a constant looping reminder that once upon a time there was you. And he never saw it for what it was, until all he had left was the empty space where you used to be. People like to believe they're in control, that they can predict what's coming, prepare for it, shape the world to their liking. It's comforting, that illusion. A man especially, he clings to it, tells himself he knows the rules, knows the game, knows exactly how to keep things running smoothly. Emotions? Nah, those are just distractions. Attachments? Weakness. Love? That's a trick people fall for when they're not paying attention. And he's always paying attention. Then, of course, life has a sense of humor, because that's when you show up. And you don't announce yourself with some grand entrance. You don't break down walls, don't demand anything. You just exist, quietly, effortlessly, like a song he didn't even realize was playing in the background. A familiar tune that suddenly won't leave his head. At first he shrugs it off. Just a moment, a passing thought. He's fine. He's always fine, but something shifts. He starts noticing things he never noticed before. The way his world feels a little brighter when you're in it. The way conversations with you don't feel like conversations at all, but something lighter, something real. He catches himself looking forward to your presence, not because he needs it, no, but because it changes something in him, makes things less heavy, makes him feel. And feeling, that's dangerous. That's unpredictable. That's out of his control. So what does he do? He fights it. Of course he does. He pulls back, convinces himself it's nothing. Just a trick of the mind, just a momentary lapse. But here's the thing. Once something changes inside you, there's no going back. No pretending you don't feel what you feel. And the more he tries to ignore it, the louder it gets. Until one day, without even realizing it, he's expecting you. Expecting your voice, your presence, your touch. And when it's not there, when something shifts, when you start pulling back, that's when it hits. See, a man never realizes how much he values something until he feels it slipping away, until the comfort of you, the presence of you, isn't a given anymore. That's when the panic sets in, slow at first, like a whisper in the back of his mind. Something's different, something's wrong, but he won't admit it. No, not yet, because admitting it means acknowledging that he let himself get attached, that he let something beyond his control become important, and that's terrifying. So he waits. He tells himself it's just a phase, that things will go back to normal, but they don't, because now there's a gap, a space where you used to be, and everything else, it just feels off. The conversations feel dull, the distractions don't work, and suddenly the things that used to be enough aren't. And now, he's left with the realization that somewhere along the way, you became more than just a presence in his life. You became part of him. And losing you, that's not something he ever planned for. Not something he ever saw coming. And the worst part, the part that gnaws at him, keeps him awake at night, he never even got the chance to fight for it. Because by the time he figured it out, you were already gone. A man spends his whole life thinking he's untouchable, that nothing can shake him, nothing can break him. He builds walls, not the kind you see, no, the invisible kind. The ones made of silence, of distance, of pretending he doesn't care. And for the longest time, it works. He walks through life convinced that emotions are for fools, that love is just a game people lose. He doesn't get attached, doesn't get too close. Because close means vulnerable, and vulnerable, that means someone can hurt you. Then of course there's you, and you don't knock down his walls, don't demand to be let in, you just exist. And somehow that's worse, because without even trying, without even meaning to, you slip through. In the quiet moments, in the spaces between his carefully controlled life, you become the exception to the rules he spent years perfecting. And he hates it. At first he pretends not to notice. It's nothing, just a passing thought, just another face in the crowd. But then there's a moment, small, insignificant to anyone else, but to him it changes everything. Maybe it's the way you laugh, the way your voice lingers in his head long after you're gone. Maybe it's the way you look at him, like you see him, really see him, and not just the version he shows the world. Maybe it's the way being around you makes the weight on his shoulders feel just a little lighter, even if he'll never admit it. But the thing about a man like him, he doesn't do feelings, so he does what he does best. He pushes it away. He tells himself it's nothing, that he's fine, that this isn't happening. And for a while, maybe that works. He keeps his distance, keeps things simple, keeps himself in control. But control, that's an illusion, a fragile little lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Because feelings, real feelings, they don't just disappear because you tell them to. They grow, they fester, they sit there just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to remind you that you're not as untouchable as you thought. And then, just like that, you're gone. Maybe you get tired of waiting. Maybe life pulls you in another direction. Maybe you just realize that loving a man who refuses to love you back is like chasing a ghost. Whatever the reason, one day he looks around and you're not there, and that's when it hits. See, a man never understands the value of something while he has it. No, he only figures it out when it's missing, when the silence that he once needed suddenly feels suffocating, when the space that used to be his escape now feels empty. We become he goes through his days the same way he always did, but everything is off. The things that used to distract him don't work anymore. The routines feel meaningless. And in the quiet, in the moments when there's nothing left to drown out his own thoughts, there you are, a ghost he can't shake, a memory that lingers no matter how much he tries to push it away. And here's the worst part, the part that makes it unbearable. He knows, deep down in that place he never lets anyone see, he did this to himself. That he had something real, something rare, and he let it slip through his fingers. Not because he didn't care, no, that would be easy. It's because he cared too much. Because caring meant risk, and risk meant pain. And pain is the one thing he's spent his whole life running from. But now, the pain is all that's left, because missing someone isn't just about their absence. It's about all the things you never said, all the moments you let pass because you were too scared to reach out and grab them, all the times you could have chosen love, but instead you chose fear. And a man like him, he'll never say it out loud, never admit it to anyone else, but when he closes his eyes at night, when the world goes quiet and there's no one left to fool, he knows the truth. He lets something slip away that he'll never find again. And that's a kind of regret that never really fades. A man walks through life thinking he's got it all figured out. He tells himself that nothing can shake him, that he's untouchable, unbreakable. He convinces himself that feelings are just complications, that love is a distraction, that attachments, those are just chains people put on themselves, willingly, foolishly. He's free, you see, free from the mess, the pain, the chaos. Or so he thinks. Then you come along, and you don't come crashing into his world. No, that would be too obvious, too easy to resist. Instead, you slip in like a whisper, like a song he didn't even realize he was humming. And at first, he doesn't pay much attention. After all, he's seen this before, hasn't he? He knows how this goes. But the thing is, this is different. Because it's not about grand gestures, not about chasing or being chased. It's in the little things, the unnoticed moments, the quiet shifts in his carefully constructed reality. It's in the way you laugh, not at him, but with him, like you've unlocked some part of him even he didn't know was there. It's in the way you listen, really listen, not just to the words, but to everything in between. It's in the way you don't try to change him, don't try to fix him, don't try to make him into something he's not. You just let him be. And somehow that's more dangerous than anything else, because now, without even realizing it, he starts looking for you. In a room full of people, in the middle of a conversation, in the quiet of his own thoughts, he starts expecting you the way a person expects the sun to rise, without thinking, without questioning. And when you're not there, that's when the shift happens. That's when the ground beneath him starts to feel a little less solid. That's when he realizes that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just another face in the crowd. You became something more. And the worst part, he doesn't know when it happened. He doesn't know how it happened. All he knows is that it did. So what does a man like him do? Oh, he panics. He does what he's always done. He pulls back, builds the walls higher, tells himself he doesn't need anyone, least of all you. He reminds himself of all the reasons why attachments are dangerous, why feelings are nothing but a trap. He convinces himself that walking away is the right move, the smart move, because if he doesn't care, he can't get hurt. If he doesn't hold on, he can't lose anything. But life has a funny way of teaching lessons the hard way. Because the second you stop chasing, the second you stop being there, he feels it. And oh, does he feel it. At first, it's subtle. An empty space where a message from you used to be. A quiet moment that lasts a little too long. But then it's everywhere. It's in the way his favorite song doesn't sound the same. It's in the way the things that used to distract him don't work anymore. It's in the way the world feels a little colder, a little less alive. And now he's left with a realization he never wanted to have. That maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. That maybe he wasn't as untouchable as he thought. That maybe letting someone in wouldn't have been the worst thing after all. But by the time he understands that, by the time he's ready to admit it, you're already gone. And that's the thing about men like him. They never realize what they had until it's slipping through their fingers. They never understand the weight of silence until it's deafening. And they never know how much they needed you until they wake up one day and find themselves drowning in a world that suddenly feels so much less. And what do they do then? Do they chase? Do they fight? Do they finally admit what they spent so long denying? Or do they just sit there in the mess they made? A man like him, he thinks he's invincible. He walks around like nothing can touch him. Like the world can't leave a single mark on his skin. He laughs at the idea of getting attached, scoffs at emotions like they're some kind of weakness. Love? Oh, that's for fools. Feelings? Just distractions. He's got control, you see, and control means power. Control means no surprises. Control means he's always one step ahead, never caught off guard, never left vulnerable. And then of course there's you. And you don't fit into his perfect little system. You don't play by the rules he's spent years mastering. You don't try to get inside his head. Don't chase him down. Don't beg for his attention. No, you just are. And somehow, that's the problem. Because a man like him, he's used to people demanding things from him. his time, his affection, his attention. But you do something far worse. You make him want to give it. At first, he doesn't even realize it's happening. It starts small, too small to notice. Maybe it's the way he finds himself looking for you in a crowded room. Maybe it's the way his mind drifts to you when he's supposed to be focused on something else. Maybe it's the way your absence lingers longer than it should, like a whisper in the back of his head that won't go away. But a man like him, he doesn't like noticing things, so he fights it. Oh, does he fight it. He tells himself it's nothing, that it's just habit, just routine, just a passing thought. He convinces himself that he could walk away any time, that you don't matter in the grand scheme of things. But life has a cruel sense of humor, because just when he thinks he's got it all under control, that's when the real game begins. See, when a man like him starts to miss you, really miss you, it's not just about longing. No, it's worse than that. It's about realization. It's about looking at the world around him and seeing all the empty spaces you used to fill. It's about waking up in the morning and feeling like something's off, but not knowing exactly why. Until he does. Until he realizes that his days were a little brighter with you in them, that his nights weren't as quiet, that the weight he carried felt just a little lighter when you were around. And once he sees it, once that truth sinks its teeth into him, oh, that's when the real suffering starts, because now every little thing reminds him of you. The way a certain song plays and he remembers how you hummed it absent-mindedly. The way he catches a glimpse of something funny and instinctively thinks, she'd love this. The way he reaches for his phone before remembering there's no reason to. He tells himself it's just a phase, that he'll shake it off, that he's fine, that he's not that kind of guy. But time doesn't heal men like him. No, time makes it worse. Because as the days go by, he doesn't just miss you. He realizes he needed you. And needing someone, that's the one thing he swore he'd never do. And now he's trapped. Because the things that used to distract him don't work anymore. The routines he once relied on feel empty. The world, it's the same. But he's not, because once a man like him tastes something real, he can't just go back to pretending. He can try. Oh, he'll try. He'll fill his time with meaningless conversations, empty moments, distractions that last just long enough to make him think he's over it. But the second he's alone, the second the noise fades and he's left with nothing but his own thoughts, there you are, unshakable, unavoidable, and the cruelest part, he knows. He knows. This is all his own doing, that he had something rare, something different, something that doesn't come around twice, and he let it slip away, not because he didn't care, but because caring meant risk, and risk meant pain, and pain, well, pain is the one thing he spent his whole life running from. But now, the pain is all that's left, because a man like him, he never realizes what he had until it's gone. And when it's gone, that's when he learns the one lesson he never wanted to learn, that some people don't come back.